There was once a shoemaker who had become so poor, through no fault of his own, that he had hardly any leather left, only enough to make one pair of shoes, in fact. He cut them out in the evening, intending to start work on them in the morning, and then went to bed. He had a clear conscience, so he said his prayers and then slept peacefully. Next morning he woke up, had a bite of dry bread, and sat down at his bench, only to find the shoes completed already. He was astonished. He picked them up and looked at them closely from all angles. Every stitch was neat and tight. Nothing was out of place. He couldn't have done better himself. A customer soon came in, looking for shoes of just that size, and liked them so much, he bought them at once for a good price. They gave the shoemaker enough money to buy leather for 2 pairs of shoes. So he did that, and as before, he cut them out in the evening, meaning to carry on in the morning in good heart. But he had no need to. When he got up, the shoes were already made, just as before, stitched as if by a master craftsman. He soon found customers for them, and that left him enough profit to buy leather for 4 pairs, and next morning they were finished, and he sold them, and so it went on. Each evening he cut the shoes out. Next morning they were finished, so that pretty soon he was making a good income, and not much later he was a wealthy man. One evening, not long before Christmas, he cut out a number of shoes as usual, and then said to his wife, just as they were going to bed, "Why don't we stay up a bit tonight and see if we can find out who's been helping us?" His wife thought that was a good idea, and they lit the lamp and hid behind a rail of clothes hanging up in the corner of the workroom. At midnight, 2 little naked men squeezed in under the door and jumped up to the workbench, where they set to work at once, sewing together the cut-out shoes at a speed the shoemaker could hardly believe. They worked until they'd finished every one, and then they put the shoes on the bench and went out under the door. In the morning, the shoemaker's wife said, "I think we should do something in return for those 2 little men. After all, they've made us rich, and there they are, running about in the cold with nothing on. I'm going to sew them some shirts and jackets, and some underwear and some trousers, and knit a pair of stockings for each of them as well, and you can make them each a little pair of shoes." "That's a good idea," said the shoemaker, and they set to work. That evening, they set the clothes out on the bench instead of the cut-out shoes, and hid again to see what the little men would do. At midnight, they came in and leapt up to the bench as before, intending to start work, and then they stopped, looking at the clothes and scratching their heads in puzzlement. Then they realized what they were for, and jumped for joy, put them on at once, and preened themselves singing, "We're finer than we were before. We shan't be cobblers any more." They leaped about like a pair of kittens, on the chairs, the bench, the hearth, the windowsill, and finally they darted under the door and were gone. They never came back, but the shoemaker prospered. All his work went well from then on, and he and his wife lived happy and wealthy till the end of their days. Once there was a poor servant girl who always worked hard and was diligent and neat in all she did. Every day she would sweep out the house and pile the rubbish outside the back door. One morning, just as she was about to start work, she saw a letter in among the rubbish. Since she couldn't read, she stood her broom in the corner and took the letter to her mistress. It turned out to be an invitation from the elves, inviting the girl to stand as godmother at the forthcoming baptism of an elf child. "I don't know what to do, ma'am," she said. "No, it's difficult, Gretchen," said her mistress. "But I've heard that it's not right to turn down an invitation from the elves. I think you should accept." "Well, if you say so, ma'am," said Gretchen. The mistress helped her write a letter accepting the invitation. She left it where she'd found the other one, and when her back was turned, it vanished, and shortly afterwards, 3 elves turned up and led her to a hollow mountain. She had to bend her head a little to go in, but once she was inside, she was amazed at the beauty of everything she saw, which was delicate and precious beyond description. The new mother was lying on a bed of the blackest ebony inset with pearly shells. The counterpane was embroidered with gold thread. The cradle was of ivory, and the little bathtub of solid gold. The baby was no bigger than her little fingernail. The girl stood in as godmother, and then she asked to go back home, because she was needed to work the next day. But the elves pleaded with her to stay with them, just for 3 days. They were so persuasive and so friendly that she gave in and had a fine time. They did everything they could to make her happy. When 3 days had gone by, she told them that she really must return home. They filled her pockets with gold and led her outside. She set off homewards and reached the house late in the morning, finding her broom still in the corner where she'd left it. She picked it up and started sweeping as usual, but was astonished when some strangers came out of the house and asked her what she was doing. It turned out that her old employer had died, and she hadn't spent 3 days in the mountain as she'd thought, but 7 years. A mother had her baby stolen from his cradle by the elves, and in his place they laid a changeling, a little monster with a great thick head and staring eyes, who did nothing but eat and drink. In distress, she went to a neighbor and asked her advice. The neighbor told her to take the changeling into the kitchen, lay him on the hearth, and make a fire. Then she should take 2 eggshells and boil some water in them. That would make the changeling laugh, and as soon as he laughed, it would be all up with him. The woman did everything just as her neighbor said, and when she put the eggshells on the fire to boil, the blockhead sang out, "I'm as old as the Westerwald, but I've never seen anyone try to boil water in an eggshell." And he roared with laughter. As soon as he did that, a crowd of little elves appeared, carrying the rightful child. They set him on the hearth and took the changeling away, and the woman never saw them again.